Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel and the World Class Championship Wrestling Review Series. We are into the last week in October, October 30th, 1982, and things are really heating up for the holiday season. King Kong Bundy opens the program talking about going on strike with Hart and Hussein International. He says he has not been paid appropriately, says he is the leader of the organization, and the biggest name should be treated as such, is not being treated as such. He wants out. This does not mean he's a babyface, although, to be fair, there are some fans in the area who see him that way. It's interesting that, again, Hart is losing another member to his organization. This seems to happen every 2 or 3 months, and it's an interesting philosophy to build around a manager for the sake of being able to cycle people in and out based on the needs of the manager. Anyway, we move into the first match of the week, which is Samoan number 1, or the Samoan versus Magic Dragon. Obviously, a showcase for Dragon here, although the Samoan continually always has competitive matches, as the Samoans are wont to do. We move in with, an agreement, I guess you'd say, about H&H moving in, I guess, what would be considered different directions to a degree. But then we go into the match where Magic Dragon is allowed to thrive. Dragon is wearing a black mask once again with a what looks to be international robe of some note. Arman Hussein again out there. Seems Gary Hart only wants to be bothered when it's Kabuki, and I still don't understand that. Maybe someday we'll learn why that is, but it is what it is here. So we see that Magic Dragon makes his way around, of course. The understudy of the great Kabuki, they're continuing that story. Very basic wrestling from the Samoan hammerlocks and drop toe holds, takedowns, and the sort, showing that although he is not very experienced, he still is competent, as one would expect coming from the Samoan family, both in a kayfabe sense and in a real life sense. The Samoans have always been able to make a showing of themselves all the way going back to the 70s in the San Francisco and LA areas where they originated and all of that. What I find interesting that I don't think I've mentioned to this point, is that they still acknowledge other territories. They acknowledge the NWA champion Ric Flair, but they do, upon occasion, acknowledge the WWF and other places. They did acknowledge the Superfly Jimmy Snuka at a point. They do acknowledge the Wild Samoans being the tag team champions across the country. So it's an interesting dichotomy of a promotion that does have its own territory, is treating itself as an expanding national company, but is not so intimidated they can't admit to having other competitors that are viable. Polish Hammer in the midst of the battle here with the Samoan not getting what he wants out of that, obviously, not getting what he wants out of most of his offense, but gets enough that he does get a good showing in almost every match. Of course, some are better than others, but that it is what it is as far as that's concerned. Obviously, when given the opportunity, the Magic Dragon always uses his agility and splashes and does get the victory there. The next thing we move into is a match between another Gary Hart and H&H member in the Checkmate versus Raul Castro, another masked individual. Interesting that masked talent, both in a pushed and non-pushed form, is abundant here in Texas. I don't understand it, but I would chalk it up to having portions of Texas very close to the Mexican border, so trying to do the lucha libre infusion. Lots of unique strikes, knee lifts, and submission maneuvers by the Checkmate, who they continually put in the position of being a international star slash European champion. They acknowledge that almost every time he's out and about. He does the armadillo fold up spot, and Castro, not knowing what to do with him here, the takedown and use of the ring apron as a weapon is not new, as Checkmate does it here and tries to get an advantage over his adversary as easily as he can. Kickoff by Raul, but a roll through into what looks to be almost a modified SDF attempt into a pinning combination. Not quite something I think I've ever seen before, but Checkmate gets a very weird pinning combination victory. We then go to a interview segment where Gary Hart debates with King Kong Bundy. Bundy, smoking a cigar, unimpressed with Hart, wants to be a free agent, feels that he has not been paid appropriately or featured rightly in Hart's stable. Basically admits to being willing to work with whomever, wherever. Admits to providing Fritz von Erich with information related to the bounty that Kerry Von Erich had placed on his head by Ric Flair and Gary Hart cashed in on. So he starts to talk about not really caring one way or the other, and wants to be a free agent away from Hart and all of that. So Grand Marcus number 2 versus Jose Lothario up next, as is to be expected. Another masked superstar against a lucha standout in Lothario. Lothario, obviously not my favorite. I've mentioned it before, but I respect him enough to realize and recognize that he has a place in history. Grand Mark, not necessarily somebody I know a great deal about, but has a competitive match with Lothario nonetheless. A guy who I think you can easily say is competent, although not brought in to be a star, and sometimes you need to be that. Lots of counter wrestling, lots of takedowns, leg holds, and the like. Lothario, who doesn't like to leave his feet if he doesn't have to. More of a punch kick style guy, more of a guy who is just there to make an impact and not take a whole bunch of bumps, but will leave his feet when he needs to. But actually takes Grand Mark and puts him on the top rope and slings him across almost with a top rope arm drag, which gets the crowd on their feet, things they haven't seen before. Cut off by Mark and goes after Lothario for quite a bit. The fans are solidly behind good old Super Sock, and he gets socked, trying to get back in the ring after being sent to the Sportatorium floor. A backdrop over the top rope, I believe, leads to a disqualification. Of course, the over-to-the-top rule still enforced by the NWA here. Although, yes, the referee does raise his hand, and Grand Mark II gets a victory, much to the chagrin of Jose Lothario, for the over-the-top rule infraction. We move on to Bill Irwin and the Destroyer, number 1, versus the Freebirds. Of course, the Freebirds being the debuting Terry Gordy and Michael P.S. Hayes. The Destroyer, not quite sure which incarnation of the Destroyer this is, but doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, as the highlight on the Freebirds, who are already major stars here in Texas just a few weeks into their debut. Obviously, Bill Irwin going at it with Michael Hayes last week, and the continuation of that is the open for this contest. Certainly, he is a guy who is not going to back down. Gordy using that brawling style. Destroyer not much more than a preliminary guy in this particular incarnation, as he is very thin, and Gordy can overpower him easily and does so several times. Gordy with a leapfrog, which is big for the big man. Talked about being 20 or 21 here. Of course, Gordy starts wrestling at about 15, 16 years old. Some magazines have him as young as 14, but 15, 16 sounds more right. About 21 here. So he's got years of experience behind his belt, and many would say hitting his stride here. Gordy doesn't waste any motion, not intimidated by being in the ring with Bill Irwin, the Destroyer, or anybody else. It is clear that the Freebirds are favorites in the area. Not quite as big as the Von Erichs, but I wonder if the turn isn't to dissuade the fans from having to make that choice. Seems like a logical thought. Anyway, Terry Gordy willing to cheat and use whatever he can to get ahead. Low blow by Michael Hayes. Hayes tries to make the tag, getting near his corner but not being able to do it. Gordy, though, does get back in the ring near the very close of the contest, and obviously the new tag team going to do what they need to do to get a victory here, although it might have taken them a little bit more than a lot of people would have expected. Gordy comes back in and is clearing the ring. The double team maneuver is there, and Gordy uses what is a backdrop powerbomb, backdrop by Hayes, powerbomb by Gordy, as a tag team finish combination. Looks brutal, looks devastating, and the Freebirds walk away as your winners for the evening's main event. We see a alliance formed with Irwin, Bundy, and Kevin Von Erich, talked about here to a degree. I don't necessarily know whether that's just not, Bundy doing some talking or what that looks like. Irwin and Bundy are aligned, and Kevin Von Erich has his say. So basically, the idea is that Bundy and Irwin want their shot at the Freebirds, and Bundy says that he will still be there for Irwin, but he's done with H&H, wants his free agency, wants his freedom, and all of that associated with that, and fans not quite sure what to make of Bundy in this scenario, but willing to offer him some support. But until then, we move into November with Up Next. But until then, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Till next time, everybody.